Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Reaves Arena on the campus of the Georgia National Fairgrounds and Agricenter in Perry, Georgia. I'm Frank Malloy with 13 WMAZ in Macon, the moderator for tonight's gubernatorial debate among the three men who wish to be governor of Georgia, and we certainly appreciate each of them for taking time to be here tonight. We certainly appreciate all of you who are in the audience tonight and our panelists. Of course, the spotlight tonight is on the candidates. We will introduce them left to right. The Libertarian candidate, Mr. Andrew Hunt. The Democratic candidate, Mr. Jason Harder. And our Republican incumbent, Governor Nathan Deal. Tonight's debate. We will begin with 1-minute opening statements from each of the candidates. We will then have questions from our panelists, who we'll introduce in a minute. Then the candidates will get a chance to question one another. We go back to more questions from our panelists, and each candidate will have a 1-minute closing statement. Let's introduce our panelists. Special Projects Editor for 13 WMAZ in Macon, Mr. Randall Savage. Host and reporter, GPB Radio, Miss Leah Fleming. News anchor, reporter, WXIA Television in Atlanta, Mr. Jeff Hullinger. And veteran writer and columnist for the AJC, Mr. Jim Galloway. We will begin with opening statements drawn beforehand. We will proceed left to right. 1-minute opening statement will begin with Mr. Hunt.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here before you, and I am putting myself forth to be your next governor of Georgia. I am doing this because a majority of people in surveys have said they want something different. They're tired of the two big parties, and they want someone that will work for the people instead of the special interest groups that have overtaken our government. We need to restore these rights and liberties. We need freedom and fairness. We need to concentrate on giving people a hand up in life so that we can reduce the handouts. We have the highest unemployment in the nation. Our schools are suffering, and that makes our children suffer. We need to turn this around. A vote for Hunt is not a wasted vote. It's a vote that you want change. You want something different. You want something that will bring Georgia back to the greatness it's supposed to be. We need to have a new way. We need to have unemployment less than 5%, and we need to be a top 20 in education. Thank you.
Opening statement, Mr. Carter.
Thank you all so much for having me tonight. It's exciting to look out at this crowd. We were talking backstage. It sounds like democracy out here. And I'll tell you, it's great to look out at the audience. My wife and my two boys are sitting here in the front row. This is an incredible state. It's an incredible place. It's my roots go deep here. All of us live here and have chosen to build our future here. And I'll tell you, that future is one not only that we share, but that can be very, very bright. Georgia has every ingredient that it needs to be a powerhouse. We just have to put them together in a way that makes sense. And right now, Georgia is ready for an education system that's moving forward instead of sliding backwards. Georgia is ready for an economy that strengthens the middle class. And Georgia is ready for an honest government. And I'll tell you, those issues are what brought me here tonight. I look forward to this discussion, and whether you came to cheer or boo, at the end of this, I'll ask for your support, and I'll be honored. Thank you.
1-minute opening statement, Governor Deal.
Thank you very much. 4 years ago, the citizens of this state gave me the greatest honor of my life when they elected me the governor of this great state. A state in which I was born, a state in which I was educated, and a state in which I have raised my children. This is a state that has, likewise, as Senator Carter says, great promise. But I came into office during the midst of the Great Recession, and let me tell you what we have done. We have done something that this state has never had the distinction of doing before. We have been designated as the best state in the nation in which to do business. We have created 300,000 new private sector jobs. We have put more money as a percentage of a state budget into K through 12 education in my 4 budgets than any governor since Carl Sanders in the early 60s. That is 50 years. I look forward to the discussion tonight, too.
All right. We'll begin questioning with Randall Savage. Randall, you are director. First question to Mr. Carter, please.
Mr. Carter, you're talking about creating a separate educational fund for K through 12. How would that improve education and get more money into the programs?
Right now, Randall, our budget is a shell game. And what we see is that every year, the politicians in Atlanta, they take money out of the education fund and they spend it on other things. I believe that education has to be our first priority every single year. Not just in an election year. Not just in an election year. And not just when the times are good, but all the time. And I believe that if we ask the politicians to raise their hand and vote on whether or not we are properly funding our schools, I think they'll do the right thing. And that political accountability and that honesty is needed so much right now, because if you walk around this state, if you go sit in the cafeteria in Randolph County like I did, or you go and speak to teachers across this state like I have, you cannot walk into those schools and believe that the education system is getting what it needs. And if we truly make it our priority every year, and we force those politicians to vote on it, I believe that we will improve our education system here in Georgia.
Leah Fleming. Next question from Leah. Randall, would you like to follow up?
Mr. Deal was casting an naughty look at Mr. Carter when he was talking about the educational funds. Would you like to respond to his remarks?
Well, Senator Carter calls it what we have now, a shell game. If I've ever heard of a shell game, it's to create a separate budget when he doesn't tell us how much money he's going to put in it. He doesn't tell us if there's a new funding source to put money in this separate budget. National education commissions that have looked at this say it doesn't work. It's in Alabama. It doesn't work. Their governor's threatening to have to call a special session of the General Assembly. Maybe he didn't hear that in my 4 budgets, we have put the highest percentage of our state budget into K through 12 education. Of any governor since Carl Sanders was governor in the early 60s. That's a 50-year period. We're doing, I think, extraordinarily well in terms of funding K through 12 education.
He's incorrect. May I respond?
Folks, please. Thank you. We're going to wrap this up. Mr. Carter, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
I've been as fiscally conservative as anybody in the state Senate. But I reject the idea that you cannot be conservative and solve problems. I reject that idea. The excuses that we have for underfunding education this year alone, when we've claimed a 30% increase or hundreds of millions of dollars added, we've in fact seen $750 million underfunded our education budget. You can't go into those schools and see those schools and those students and believe we're doing the right thing. You can't do it.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question.
I want to rebuttal. Let me rebut it. I've had 4 budgets. He voted for 3 of those budgets. This year, he voted against the budget that had the largest amount of money for education K through 12 in 7 years.
We'll be here all night. Rebuttals are only if you're attacked. Rebuttals are in case if you're attacked. We're going to move on to the next question. Leah, you'll direct it to Governor Deal, please.
All right. Education is one of the most critical issues facing Georgians. And Governor Deal, in your first year, you pushed through several changes to hope. And you said that this was to ensure its long-term viability. Are you pleased with what you've seen, and what would you do to fix hope?
Well, let me tell you what we did to fix hope. When I came into office in January of 2011, we were told if we didn't do something, it was going to go bankrupt in 2013. We reformed it, we kept it fiscally solvent, and it is going to be there for generations to come. That's the responsible thing to do. Had we left it alone, or had we followed the model that Senator Carter suggested that we do, hope would be bankrupt today. We've saved hope.
May I respond?
Mr. Carter, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
There are 80,000 fewer hope recipients today than there were when the governor took over. That cannot be success. We have to make access to higher education a fundamental part of our state policy. Because if we give people that opportunity, they will take it. 80,000 fewer hope recipients is not success. That's not saving the program. That's destroying it.
Mr. Hullinger. Jeff Hullinger, you're asking questions.
Well, let's stay on this theme. I think everybody in the crowd is enjoying hearing talk about education and Hope Scholarship. Mr. Hunt, in your opening statement, I was struck by a couple of phrases that you used. One was something different. The other phrase was a new way. There are familiar cliches in American politics that, oh, how I wish there was an alternative to Democrats and Republicans. What is the alternative on hope from the libertarian point of view?
Well, first of all, to have a great hope program, you have to have a great K-12 program. And we have one of the worst in the nation. We have to turn around the lower education completely. They're talking about small changes here. We need to completely revamp it. We need to have parents have the choice to send their kids to the school they want to. We need to have a variety of different schools. We need STEM schools. We need blended schools. We need traditional schools. We need vocational schools. And then the parents can choose what's best for them. We have to have it that none of our schools graduate less than 90%. We have some that graduate less than 50%. That is setting up our whole state for people that can't function later on. We have to change this. We have to turn it, and we have to do it rapidly. It's critical that we change not a little bit, not that we add a little money to a broken system. That won't do it. We have to completely revamp it and take it over.
Jim Galloway, your question will go to Mr. Carter, please.
Mr. Carter, let's return to one of the points that Mr. Deal just made. You voted for 3 of the Governor Deal's 4 budgets, but accused the governor of underfunding education. At a meeting of educators last month, you said a Democratic task force on the topic changed your mind on that last one. Your wife is a high school teacher. Why did it take a task force to change your mind on that one?
I'll tell you, Jim, I believe in bipartisanship. And I sat those budgets passed unanimously. And I sat in the state legislature and did my best to work across the aisle. But really, when you get outside of Atlanta, when you go, and as I said before, and sit in the cafeteria in Randolph County, you talk to enough teachers, I could not sit by anymore and continue to vote for budgets that underfunded education by billions of dollars year after year after year. As Dr. Hunt said, we've got to do better. Investing in our people is the only way that we're going to get what we need as a state. Our economy depends on it. And I believe that education is economic development. And if we're leaving it behind, if we continue down this road with a broken shell game of a budget, and we don't change that and add to that budgeting process real political accountability, then we won't be where we need to be in this state. I think nobody believes, I don't even think Governor Deal believes, that we have done a good job in giving our schools what they need.
Governor Deal?
Yes. Governor Deal, you may respond.
Let me point out that it makes no sense to complain about budgets that you supported, which is what Senator Carter's done. It makes no sense to say that the year in which our revenue had increased so that we could increase funding for the largest percentage and total dollar amount in 7 years, that you all of a sudden have gone with a few other Democrats and taken an epiphany tour. I don't know what changed his mind. I don't know why he would say that suddenly he sees that we should not vote for a budget with greater increases in K through 12 education funding. Ironically, those other Democrats that went with him did not have that same eye-opening experience. They came back and voted for the budget.
We'll wrap this question up, Mr. Carter, and then we need to move on to the next question for the governor.
We all know that the budgeting process in our state is broken for education. We know it. And anyone who walks into the schools, my child's kindergarten class has too many kids in it. It just does. Those are the facts. And the bottom line is we have a plan for fixing it. We can move forward in this state. We can be honest and transparent in our education budget if we're willing to separate it out, and if we make folks take a separate vote on education, you would see real change. And that is too important for us to play partisan politics with it or to point fingers.
Randall Savage, next question for Governor Deal, please.
Mr. Deal, as you know, the possibility of legalizing medical marijuana in Georgia is alive and well. If it makes it through and you're still the governor, will you sign it?
It depends on what form it comes to my desk. As you know, when the General Assembly failed to take action last year, I took executive order action. We have created a relationship with the Federal Food and Drug Administration, who are working cooperatively with Georgia Regents University in Augusta. For the first time, we're going to have clinical trials making approved medical marijuana available to children with seizures in our state. We have also worked with the company that has the product that's on the market that is in clinical trials now. They have agreed to make Georgia one of the states in which they will expand their clinical trials. Now, there is still an issue, and that is, are you going to have unregulated availability of marijuana? I am adamantly opposed to that. Georgia does not need to become a Colorado. I believe that there are ways for us to do that that will answer the critical issue of the availability for parents who want that serum that is available from certain of the plants. And we are in the process of trying to do that.
Leah, you have the next question for Mr. Hunt, please.
Mr. Hunt, you said that there are too many lawyers in politics and that we need some diversity of professions. You're in the engineering field. How would someone of your background benefit Georgians?
Well, as we know, attorneys are extremely gifted at speaking. As you can hear, they're very fluid, smooth, and they're very polished. They make great people to run for office. They really do. But the problem is who is in the office, who's going to be the most effective leader, who's going to find the cost-effective solutions to solve our major problems. An engineer, that's their training, that's their background. But I'm not just an engineer, I'm a small businessman, so I know what it takes to run the regulations, the rules, the laws that attack job creation in the economy. We need to move this forward with effective small business solutions, a fair and level playing field for everyone. Right now, you only get benefits to major corporations that do a lot of lobbying and donation to campaigns. And we need it that the regular people get the benefit from all of this. We the people, that's who it's for. That's what the Constitution says, and that's what I'll stand for.
That completes 2 rounds of questions. At this time, the candidates will get to question one another. You may choose either candidate. Again, we drew beforehand to see who would do this first. Mr. Carter, you are up first. You may question either candidate.
I have a question for Governor Deal. Governor Deal, you've made the centerpiece of your campaign, including tonight, a magazine article that says that Georgia is the best place to do business. But out here in the real world, we're dead last in unemployment. We're dead last in how fast we're recovering from the recession. And folks out here in Middle Georgia and Perry and Macon aren't feeling it. And my question is, how long do they have to wait in your economy to get the benefits that you're talking about?
Senator Carter, I know that you're young and inexperienced, but obviously you're trying to hold me accountable for the Great Recession. are quoting numbers of 10 years ago. I wasn't responsible for the Great Recession. Why don't you talk about what's happened since I've been governor? The average family income, the household income has increased every year that I have been governor. We have lowered the burden of people on their taxes. We have abolished the marriage tax penalty in Georgia. We've abolished the estate tax so that businesses can keep it from one generation to the next. And that's the reason that I think we are all concentrated on moving forward. We have created new jobs. We are now the 4th fastest job creator in the country last year, and it continues to grow.
We're just questioning. I didn't see an attack there.
Okay.
Governor, you're according to question right now, please, either candidate.
Well, I'd like to ask Senator Carter. You have been in the state Senate for the entire amount of time that I've been governor of this state. You've never passed a bill. You've never been put in a position of leadership in your own conference within the DeKalb delegation. You've never been elected to a position of leadership within the Democrat caucus of the state Senate. Why would anybody decide that you have the leadership skills to lead this state?
Governor, I knew you were going to ask that question. With all of the issues that we have out there in our state to deal with the record that I have of bipartisan support, passing legislation to limit and to attempt to limit tax burden on small business, with all of the issues we have in this state, right now, what our state needs is a leader that has a real vision for the middle class in this state that can build it up instead of leaving it behind. I heard just a moment ago that you were blaming again someone else, blaming other people for what we have to do. We need a leader who can say, as the governor, the buck stops here, period. We're not going to say blame the Great Recession for what's happening in our state. We are dead last in unemployment. That means every other state is doing better. Every other governor and the District of Columbia have got to jump on Georgia, and that's not where we belong, and it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. This state has what it needs, and with a vision, we can carry it forward.
Mr. Hunt. Mr. Hunt?
Yes.
You may direct your question to either Mr. Carter or Governor Deal. Folks, please. We need to hear who he's going to direct his question to, please.
Jason Carter, you and I both agree that our education is one of the key areas that we have to turn around. You've also made it your economic platform, though. Now, I've heard your ways that you want to change education. You want to hire better teachers. I agree with that. But that's going to take many years to transgress the body of teachers that we have. Okay? Now, it also takes years for those students to graduate. We need job creation near term and now. Please explain to me, because I don't see it, how we're going to get near-term job creation with education changes.
Sure. My plan for job creation is clear. I do believe the first thing we have to do is stop the hole that we're in with respect to education. It's true. We have fallen behind because we have stopped investing in our people. Education is economic development. We start that now. Number two, we have to be sure that we are building an economic development program that will support small business and middle-class people, because that's who drives jobs. That's who grows business in this state. And we also have to ensure that we have put forward a dynamic set of policies that let other people know outside of our state that Georgia is a place that's investing in people. And when you look at our state on the first day of a Carter administration, you will see a state where other people can see this is a dynamic place. It's going places. We're ready to go, and we're going to welcome so many new jobs and so many new businesses to this state. Thank you.
All right. We will now resume with panelist questions. Jeff Hullinger will pick up where we left off. You will ask the question of Mr. Carter, please.
The Supreme Court yesterday let stand the appeals court rulings allowing same-sex marriage in 5 states. A major surprise that could signal the inevitability of the right of same-sex marriage nationwide. That being the case of the events over the last 24 hours, should Georgia drop its case against gay marriage?
I'll tell you, this issue is one that divides people in this state in different contexts, but I'll tell you where I stand. I don't believe you can ever tell a church who to marry. I don't believe that you can ever tell someone's religion what to believe. But the government should dole out those rights and responsibilities equally, no matter what. As far as the lawsuit goes, I don't think that we should waste taxpayer dollars, but I think that we should be clear about what happens with our Constitution. I respect the legal process, and I would let the folks that are making those decisions make them. But if it becomes clear that it's a waste of taxpayer dollars, I think we should stop.
Jim Galloway, your next question directed to Governor Deal, please.
Mr. Deal, your 4 years in office have been dominated by problems within the State Ethics Commission, especially regarding especially regarding a case involving your 2010 campaign for governor. The agency is barely functional. Its executive secretary has been dismissed in disgrace. Dismissed employees have been awarded millions of dollars in compensation. You have pledged to see this commission remade in the next session of the legislature. Why should voters trust you to accomplish that?
Let's allow the governor to answer, please.
The ethics complaints that were filed against me were heard by the 5 commissioners, and they were dismissed as having no merit. Now, I have proposed that we reorder the makeup of the Ethics Commission with 4 members being appointed by each of the 3 branches of government. And when a case of 1 member from, say, the executive branch comes before the panel, those who were appointed by the executive branch would recuse themselves and the others would decide the case. That would be the best way and the only suggestion I've heard from anybody that will remove any appearance of a conflict of interest.
Could we hear from the other 2 candidates on this?
We can't hear. Jim Galloway?
If we could hear from the other 2 candidates on this. Can we give them 30 seconds each?
Pardon me?
Can we give Mr. Carter and Mr. Hunt 30 seconds each on this?
Mr. Hunt, you each get 30 seconds.
Thank you. I find it almost amazing to say that those were dismissed after being heard. They were only dismissed after the governor's office interfered in the investigation, and now the taxpayers are on the hook for the cover. A little bit of what we did this week as taxpayers is going to pay for the cover-up that they performed. And now to brag about it, I think that's a bit much.
Our real issue is the billions of dollars of waste and cronyism in the system. This is just a small tip of the bucket of our tax dollars that we work hard for going into the system and going into these large corporations that have made the large contributions. It's just a small smidgen that you see here going on with these ethical charges. We have to change the way we do business in government. We have to get the special interest groups out, and we have to be cost effective. We need to cut taxes and run things right.
Mr. Deal, you have 30 seconds to rebut, please.
Well, I'm amazed that Senator Carter would try to distort the facts. He knows for a fact that the evidence was heard by 5 independent commissioners. They decided there was no violation, just as they have heard the complaint against you. They dismissed the complaint against you as they dismissed the complaints against me. Now, the truth of the matter is that we did not interfere. If we had, we'd have been indicted by somebody. We never have been indicted. We were never called as a witness in the cases that you refer to. We were never asked for testimony. It is something that was inherently bad in the Ethics Commission itself, and the AJC has thankfully done an expose showing that it is a dysfunctional agency and needs to be changed.
Carter, you wish to respond to the attack. We're going to allow Mr. Carter to respond, and then we move on to the next question.
As I understand the facts, I've seen the documents. I've seen the documents that say that the governor's office interfered, and I've seen the court sanction the attorneys for hiding those documents. But let me just say this. Imagine a world where the governor of Georgia comes on the radio and he's not talking about an ethics scandal. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if we were talking about something else?
All right. Randall, we're going to move on. You've got the next question for Mr. Hunt, please.
Mr. Hunt, you talk about creating jobs and obtaining a 5% unemployment rate. What specifically would you do to create those jobs and obtain that unemployment rate?
We need to do major tax reform. We have a tax system that really hurts the businesses in the area. And one of the areas so we're going to cut the income tax rate from 6% down to 4%, but get rid of all the special outs and the special privileges, so it's a level playing field. We'll also rebate to Georgia employers that offer full-time quality jobs. I want jobs at least at $11 an hour or higher to qualify for this. 8%, which is about what they pay out in these payroll taxes. We shouldn't be penalizing jobs. We should be incentivizing jobs. Jobs are the best thing we can have. This program will cost about $2.5 billion, and will cut out all the other programs where only large companies get it. This will be to single employers. This will be to our smallest towns here in the state. Everyone needs this benefit, and not just the people that can pay into the system. We need this for everyone. Every quality job counts.
Leah Fleming, next question for Mr. Carter, please.
I'm sorry, the next question is for who? Mr. Carter.
Mr. Carter.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Carter, we've talked a lot about Georgia's unemployment rate. You yourself mentioned that it was at 8.1%. If elected, what would you do to add jobs to the state?
I think the most important thing that we can do is prepare our people and let folks see that we're investing in them again. I think education is economic development, as I've said before. And I think we have to drive that message, not just for our future, but for the companies that want to come here. I believe we can grow that economy, and number one, investing in education. Number two, right now, the middle class, as Dr. Hunt said, the middle class and small business are left out of our economic development program. We have to find ways to incentivize that small business growth, because nothing is going to grow jobs faster than small businesses. And period. And the last thing we have to do is put a dynamic, forward-looking set of policies out there for innovation, for the jobs of the 21st century, and let people know that we're ready. Not just to bring big, giant companies here. We can do that too. But we've got to have a broader view of what it means to develop the economy. We want to be a great place to start a business, to develop a business, and to grow prosperous people. Thank you.
Jeff Hullinger, your question goes to Governor Deal.
You know, Governor, it's interesting how the political landscape really changes from cycle to cycle. And by that I mean 4 years ago tonight, many of us were here on this podium. Governor Barnes was here, you were here, and I think the second or third question out of the gate that was so important, not only here in Perry, but also in Atlanta toward, its ultimate growth, is water. And we're not under any of these kinds of drought situations anymore. But the issue of water remains paramount in this state. At that time, there was also the federal judge in Alabama over the water rights and all of that. It's all dissipated. It's all evaporated, if you'll pardon the pun. But the problem does remain anytime there is any kind of climate change forthcoming, whether man-made or not.
Well, and that's why, Jeff, I made a promise I have kept, and that was to devote $300 million during the course of my first 4 years in office to creating reservoirs and other water-saving devices in our state. I have done that. We have ensured that local communities are going to have access to water that they need without having to be totally dependent on reservoirs that are controlled by the federal government through the Corps of Engineers. And we have fulfilled that promise. Now, do we need to do more? Absolutely. We need to try to find a final settlement. But we will never be able to reach an agreement with Alabama and Florida as to a guaranteed water flow, especially in the drought times, unless we have the holding capacity during the good times to store up water and augment the downstream river flows. Now, we had some of those projects in that $300 million that were in this year's budget that Senator Carter voted against. We also had one of the most important things for the future of our state that does relate to water, and that is the deepening of the port of Savannah. We'll be signing those documents tomorrow. He voted against that last installment.
Frank, I think Mr. Carter on the issue of water as well, I think would be great.
We'll allow Mr. Carter to respond.
Thank you. I believe that we have bipartisan support for improving Georgia's water storage capacity. I believe that we might have bipartisan support for deepening the Savannah port. In fact, I think those issues are, as you mentioned, incredibly important to the future of our state. We have to maintain our strong position in negotiations with the other states. But I'll tell you, what we don't need is more partisan politics, more attacks that are based on process instead of true vision. I believe that we can come together and solve these problems, but I don't think we need to keep bickering about what's happening.
Jim Galloway, next question goes to Mr. Hunt.
All right, let's stick with the topic of infrastructure. Mr. Moderator, I'd like all three gentlemen to answer this question if we could. We have a joint House-Senate committee with business input looking into ways to inject more revenue into transportation spending in Georgia. It's woefully short. Conveniently, they are not due to make a report until after this election is over. So tell us, what source do you think should be tapped for more transportation spending in Georgia? If we could just go down the line.
Well, first of all, we have to use the money prudently and wisely. There's been a proposed $1 billion makeover of one interstate interchange to give us a new spaghetti junction. That backs up because of downstream traffic. We need to have cost-effective solutions that solve the problems. We need traffic light sequencing throughout the Atlanta metropolitan area, not these type of major road systems that cause traffic while they're being made. Do small interchange changes. Now, as far as where we get the revenue to do some other additional enhancements in some of these other projects in the rest of the state, well, we can look at a variety of different sources. Cut out the waste. Let's look at actually reducing the sales tax rate a little bit, make it more uniform. We'll actually increase the net revenue if we apply sales tax across everything, and even though it's a lower rate. You can do these things and they work. They've done them in other states. We need a tax reform here that works so that everyday people pay a lower tax rate, but everyone's paying equally.
Mr. Carter.
Thank you. I'll tell you, being governor requires courage. And what I saw after the transportation referendums failed over this year, and what I see, and you mentioned it in the question, Jim, there has been an absolute failure of leadership on this issue. Since that vote failed 2 years ago, the governor put out an edict that said we weren't even allowed to talk in the legislature about Plan B, that said we weren't allowed to address these issues because the politics were too difficult. I reject that. The first thing we have to have is somebody who's willing, and the only person in the state that can do it is the governor. The only person in the state that has the convening power to bring people together to solve the problems of transportation is the governor. I think, to answer your question directly, number one, we have to have a governor that's willing to lead. Number two, we have to explore everything we can within our current budget in order to prioritize those transportation dollars. We have to consider public-private partnerships in order to help fund it. And we have to revisit the regional solutions that are going to drive our state forward. We cannot afford to do nothing.
Mr. Deal.
I've heard the same thing on this issue that I've heard him say on everything else. A lot of high-sounding phrases and cliches, but no answer to your question. Let me tell you what I would do. I would continue the policy that we now have in place of prioritizing the most important transportation projects in our state. And we have done that. We have the 3 largest transportation projects in our state's history. We have just broken ground on 2 of them, and they're on the I-75 corridor to relieve congestion. We have also taken action with the I-285 Highway 400 connector, which will be the largest and most expensive project in our state. What we have done is had a great working relationship with the Department of Transportation Board, the best I think we maybe have ever had in this state. My advice to them was, let's stop spending money on plans that are simply put on somebody's bookshelf. Let's start turning some dirt. And that's what we're seeing. Now, if Senator Carter thought there was a better way, I would have supposed he would have introduced a bill to do something in a better fashion.
Time is up. Time is up.
I would have presumed
Time is up, sir.
that he would have added amendments to our budget process. He never even offered an amendment to our budget process.
Randall Savage, next question.
May I respond?
Goes to Mr. Carter, please.
Mr. Carter.
Did I get
Yes.
skipped since all three got a shot at that? Shouldn't it come back to me because all three? We went 1, 2, 3, comes back to me. Yes.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
You guys make the rules. You do what you want.
Okay. We went 1, 2,
Just have a
3, a minute
free-for-all.
each.
Let him
We
go
can
ahead,
stand
and then
all
I'll
night
go to
going around
Mr.
on
Carter.
questions. No.
Go ahead and respond, and I'll go to Mr. Carter.
What?
Go ahead and respond to that transportation thing, and then I'll go to Mr. Carter.
Well, I did already respond to it, so it's a time for a new question. All three of us responded to the transportation.
all
Oh, I understand.
Okay,
I understand.
Mr. Carter.
Yeah.
It's estimated that 620,000 uninsured Georgians would benefit from Medicaid expansion. Why should or should not it be expanded in Georgia?
Okay, so that was to me. Okay.
Mr. Carter.
Well,
I think what he is saying is since everyone answered that question, we came back out of order
Oh,
as such. So we came back.
goes to
around.
him?
I'm happy to.
So
happy to answer and let him answer after.
who's it go to?
Huh?
Who's it go to?
That one, we'll start back around with Mr. Hunt.
okay.
Go.
Okay, so I don't agree with Obamacare. I want to make that clear first of all, okay? But we paid into the federal tax system, so we need to get those tax dollars back into our state to help our economy. Now, at some point, this will probably get repealed, and then we can unwind the system and have our own system. Under the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, each state can have and should have the right for their health care system, like we should for education. We need state rights, and we need to have it that we run our system. Now, we can run a better medical system here. We can have the medical co-ops and other systems that reduce the cost, really reduce, and that's what I would do. I'd spend the time and effort to take that money in, but to use it more wisely. And so we get better service, higher quality care, tort reform to get rid of the malpractice insurance that's so high. We can cut 10 to 20% off of our health care bills just with tort reform in this area. We have good doctors. They shouldn't be threatened every time they try and help someone that way.
All right, Leah Fleming, Mr. Carter gets the next question.
Okay, and who's the next question for?
Mr. Carter, please.
Mr. Carter, okay. Atlanta has one of the widest income gaps between the wealthy and the rest of the population. If elected, do you have a plan to fix that?
I think you have watched as this economy has left the middle class behind. You've watched it. We've heard tonight the average family in Georgia makes $6,500 less than they did 10 years ago. Georgia's getting poorer. And it's getting poorer faster than virtually every other state. And so we have to address that. The key to me, and I know I keep coming back to it, but I believe in the transformative power of education. I do. If we educate our people, if we educate and invest in our people, we'll prepare them for higher paying jobs. The most important thing we can do, I believe, to bring people into the middle class is give access to higher education. That income gap right now in our state, the average technical college student is a 28-year-old woman with kids. And she's going to school to make her life better, to get a higher paying job. And when they made it more difficult to afford technical college by changing the Hope Grant, those folks, 45,000 of them left. That's the opposite of what we need. We've got to have someone who's willing to invest in that middle class and get them higher paying jobs.
Jeff.
Could I have Governor Dale?
Pardon me. Leah, would you like to follow up? Would you like to follow up, Leah?
I wanted to have Governor Deal respond.
Well, I didn't hear him answer your question. He's talked about facts that have no relevance to your question. My solution to it is the solution that I have provided since I've been governor. That's to provide more and better jobs. Of the jobs that have been brought here through our Department of Economic Development, the average salary has been $47,000. Now, I know that Senator Carter disparages people who take jobs in call centers. You know what? My philosophy is I am proud of those people who are willing to take those kind of jobs, because I believe that somebody who has a job is better than somebody who doesn't have a job.
May I respond? That's just inaccurate.
And if you have a job, you're in a better posture to get an even better job.
All right. We'll wrap up this topic. Mr. Carter, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
You have watched that gap grow under this governor. You have watched the middle class get left out under this governor. And for him to claim victory right now is just unacceptable. It doesn't take into account what we see out there in this state. Period. And I'll tell you, if we truly invest in our people, if we are there to make sure that in those high poverty schools we're able to recruit and retain the best teachers, those are tough jobs. We need to be sure we can send people to those schools to teach those kids and to make sure that folks have access. That's the best way to get higher paying jobs and the best way to lift people up. If we give people that opportunity,
move on.
they will take it.
Jeff Hullinger, next question goes to Governor Deal, please.
Governor Deal, you said the state cannot afford the expansion of Medicaid. But does it ultimately impact rural Georgia in this sense that declining health system of rural Georgia is such that some companies may not expand into our state as a result?
Well, first of all, I have made the decision that I did not think it was feasible for us to do it. It was going to be a $2.5 billion cost to the state treasury over 10 years. That's $2.5 billion that we will have to have of new money. We have already seen our Medicaid population grow by 13%, even though we have not expanded the eligibility. We had a good idea that was going to happen, and it is happening, and it is costing us a huge amount of money. Let me tell you what the Affordable Care Act is costing the state of Georgia in this year's budget. $351.5 million additional dollars for our state health benefit plan and our existing Medicaid program. We're having to come up with that just to maintain what we have. I haven't heard Senator Carter explain to me where he's going to get that new $2.5 billion.
Mr. Jim
May I
Galloway.
answer his question? May I answer
can't
his
even
question?
hear. I can't tell who's being attacked or not. It's hopeless up here at the moment. I'm doing my best, but I can't seem to hear what he said. Did you perceive an attack there?
No, he just asked me a question, and I'm happy to answer. But
No. Jim Galloway, you go to Mr. Hunt, please.
All right. Mr. Hunt, all three of you gentlemen have expressed support in some fashion for HB 60, the measure that expanded the rights of concealed carry permit holders in Georgia. The one thing that legislation did not do was extend that right to carry concealed on public university campuses. That particular part of the legislation is sure to come back next year. My question for you is, if you are elected, would you support licensed concealed carry on public university campuses in Georgia?
I am a strong supporter of the Constitution, and the Constitution's very clear on a right to bear arms. But it also has a right for property rights. And in that way, each organization should have a right to decide if they would allow guns on their property or not. That's liberty. That's freedom. And that's what we need to have in our system. We need to have it that we would have a rule that could allow, but put it up to each organization to decide if they would allow it or not. Not forced carry allowing, but make it a
So you would put it in the hands of the Board of Regents?
I would put it in the hands of each university, not just the Board of Regents. I would put it beyond the Board of Regents and allow each university or college to decide that.
Randall Savage, your question goes to Mr. Carter, please.
Mr. Carter, there's been talk of eliminating the state income tax. If it's eliminated, that revenue is going to have to come from somewhere. Where would you get that income?
I believe that right now, well, let me put it this way. My record on taxes is very clear. I've never voted for a tax increase. I've supported the cap on income that is before the voters this year. And so I believe that we have to continue to keep taxes low as a very important aspect of being a good business state. But I also don't believe we should eliminate the income tax altogether. And so I think we have to have a tax structure that supports, as I said before, the middle class and small business. Right now, the type of tax incentives that we give are reserved for people that have lobbyists. In fact, I'm not sure that anybody has gotten a tax cut that didn't have a lobbyist. But right now, what we need is to be sure that we've got a governor that will stand up for the middle class and for small businesses and ensure that their tax burden remains low and that they're not paying an unfair part of that burden.
All right, Leah, your next question goes to Governor Deal.
I want to go back to Obamacare and ask you, Governor Deal, would you accept the Medicare money from the feds to help uninsured Georgians? That's a question we got from our listeners.
A Medicare plan from the federal government that would cover uninsured Georgians?
Yes.
Well, yes, I think that is the most obvious solution that Congress should contend with. When the Supreme Court said that states could not be mandated to increase their Medicaid rolls, and many states like Georgia decided not to do that, they still, under the Act, are paying subsidies to people who are further up the income scale. It would seem to me that the federal government could very quickly solve that problem by giving the subsidies to those who are at the beginning, or rather at the end, of a state's Medicaid eligibility. Now, what that would do is this. It would not increase an entitlement program, which is very hard to ever change. It would put their insurance in the private insurance market and give them a subsidy to help them buy a private plan. Those private plans are going to require, for example, that they have co-pays, something that we can't do in a Medicaid system.
Jeff Hullinger, your question goes to Mr. Hunt, please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hunt, is that where I'm going right now? Mr. Hunt, how about two for the price of one? You ready? You get 15-second response on two of them. You ready?
Or 30 and 30? Or 45 and 15?
No, you go 15-15. You ready? Parimutuel racing. Where do you stand as a libertarian on that?
I'm sorry, on what? I didn't.
Parimutuel horse racing?
I think that we should have organizations that we deprive people the right to do things, okay? So I think it's constitutional to allow horse racing in this state, and I think we have to look at where the money goes, though. I would propose that the money goes to extending and securing the Hope Scholarship Program, just like our lottery does.
All right, I think you ate up my time for a second question. Frank, can I get it in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
As a libertarian, how hard is it for you to get on the ballot right now? Is it a tough thing around the state of Georgia?
It is so tough. It's almost impossible. And it's actually a big thing to do. If I receive 20% of the vote or higher, then there's statewide ballot access for libertarians. You can get constitutional small views sent to you through everywhere. You can have your local representatives on your different boards in the Congress and in the Senate, all available to you. You say you want a choice for a third party. The majority did that in a recent Gallup poll. You can vote it in. Vote Hunt for governor, and you will get that.
Jim Galloway, your question goes to Mr. Carter, please.
Mr. Carter, Georgia ranked 8th among states for the total number of official refugees it received in the fiscal year ending in September. The exact number was 2,710. These are courtesy of the federal government. Governor Nathan Deal has recently complained that Georgia has been disproportionately overburdened. Is he right?
I believe right now that our federal immigration program is broken, and there's no doubt about it. I think that we have to have comprehensive immigration reform, and I think that our heart goes out, of course, to all of these people who are refugees, who are looking for places to go. I agree that it is a complicated issue, and I think that Georgia should have its fair share of what's happening. But at the end of the day, we have heard repeatedly tonight that Washington politics has gotten in the way of solving problems in this state. And that kind of politics, the kind that you've heard for the first time tonight, the governor has talked about new ways of working with the federal government, for example, on medical care, which is the first time I've heard it, even though we've been talking about it for months. But at the same time, I think that those kind of politics that drove Governor Deal to take the position that he took don't help us. They don't move us forward. So I think we have to have real immigration reform. I think that Georgia needs to get its fair share of the burden, but also its fair share of the cost. So.
You wish to respond, Governor, and we move on. Next question is directed at you anyway. Okay. Randall Savage, you direct the next question to Governor Deal.
Governor Deal, Georgia has one of the highest incarceration rates of any state in the union, if not the highest. It costs about $1.1 billion to house those prisoners. What could you do to eliminate the prison population and cut that cost?
I'm glad you asked that question. That has been one of the major reforms that I have sponsored, and we have completed it in a 3-step process. The first one was to divert nonviolent offenders out of $18,000 a year prison beds into alternative courts, drug courts, DUI courts, mental health courts. From 2011, where we were spending more than $25 million a year to pay local sheriffs to keep prisoners for the state, it is now down at the end of last fiscal year to just $40,000, a savings of over $24 million in that alone. We had the second leg, and by the way, that passed unanimously. Talking about leadership, to do something like that takes leadership to get unanimous vote. The second year, it was juvenile reform. It too passed unanimously in our state. The third leg was reentry of prisoners in our system. We are going to give them education and training. 70% of them don't have a high school diploma and no GED. If we turn them loose with a major felony on their record with that same status, they are going to be in trouble, and our recidivism rate will not drop. We've already seen the incarceration rate for African Americans, for example, drop by 20%, and our overall incarceration dropped significantly.
It is time now for closing statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement. We drew beforehand to see the order. Mr. Carter, you will go first. 1 minute, please.
Thank you so much for having me and for engaging in this spirited debate. I believe that this state has every ingredient that it needs to be a powerhouse. I think that what we have to do is unleash the potential of our people, unleash the potential of our small businesses, and stand strong against the special interest in Atlanta. Right now, the middle class has been forgotten. You haven't heard the governor speak about it one time tonight, and you haven't heard the governor talk about the middle class at any other time during his time. You've watched that group. You've watched regular people in this state fall behind. And I'll tell you this, I have traveled this state. I have sat in the schools. I have watched my own children walk into those public schools. And when you put that backpack on that little boy and you carry him down to his first day of school, it matters that the state government does its job. And right now, the state government is not doing its job for education. It's not doing its job for the middle class. But it can, and if it does, Georgia will take its place, not at the bottom, but at the top. Thank you so much.
Mr. Hunt, you have 1 minute, please.
Thank you all so much for your attention this evening, and it's a pleasure to address everyone. We can have a great state. We really have to change things. We've heard small changes proposed by my opponents. We need very large changes to turn this around. Deal wants to continue with the same economic plan that has gotten us to the highest unemployment in the state. Our education's improved a little bit during the Republican years, but guess what? During the Democratic years, it wasn't good. We were even lower rankings in those years. We need to notch this up. We need to change things. We have to make it better for the people. We have to end the poverty. We're one of the highest in poverty states in the nation. We have to end this cycle. We can do it with better jobs, better education, and a fair system. I want to increase the base of income tax above $25,000. You have to start paying income tax at just a few $1,000s. Let's get that burden off the middle class, and let's really hit our economy. Thank you, and I appreciate your vote. Hunt for governor. It makes a difference. We can do this.
We will finish up. Governor Deal, 1 minute closing statement, please.
Well, first of all, thank you for your attention. Tonight, you've heard me talk about specifics, things that we have done that have brought us to the top of being the #1 state for business. We've kept a AAA bond rating, something that only 10 states in the country are able to do. We've kept our budget balanced. We've spent more money on K-12 education than any governor in the last 50 years. Now, my opponent, Mr. Carter, has been in the state legislature for the same time I've been governor. He has not passed a single piece of legislation of which he was the primary author. He complains about our budgeting process and says there is billions of dollars of waste. He's never offered an amendment to do anything to change that. I don't believe that we should put in place someone who does not understand and take advantage of the leadership opportunities that his voters have given him the chance to have. Now, we've talked a lot about the middle class. Let me tell you what. I'm the candidate that has the endorsement from the NFIB, the small business owners of the state of Georgia. Thank you. I ask for your vote. If you think these last 4 years have been good, and I believe they have been, just wait. We're going to do even more.